Have the Corbynistas, the likes of Momentum, have they told them they're coming to get you?
Well, Redbridge Momentum, which is the local group in my borough, it's a very disparate and disorganised group. But one of my members did stand up and say, "I have tattooed on my heart deselect Wes Streeting." So I think it's fair to say that there'll be some people coming from.
You're on the target list.
Yeah, but I have to say, I mean, in terms of my own constituency party, you know, on whether it's my constituency executive or my broader party membership, you know, there are plenty of people in my own constituency party who voted twice for Jeremy Corbyn, absolutely love him, love what he's doing, and also support me as their local MP as well. So, you know, they will come for me, but I never take people for granted, but I'm quietly confident they won't get me.
Now, one of the reasons you're a target is you've been very critical of Jeremy Corbyn and the leadership in general of the party over anti-Semitism and over sort of the bullying and intimidation tactics that we have seen employed online. Do you feel that the anti-Semitism row has now moved on, that it dominated coverage of Labour over the summer months, but actually the party is now moving on from that? Has Jeremy Corbyn put that behind him?
I think there's definitely the opportunity to do that. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn did say earlier this year in a very clear piece in the London Evening Standard that there is a problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that we hadn't properly addressed it, and he resolved to do so. We had this big and unnecessary row over the summer about how we define anti-Semitism. If we just defined it in the way that everyone else defines it, frankly, we could have got to a better place sooner. I still talk to people. At a conference this week, I've been talking to people who actually in much calmer and quiet and considered conversations say, look, I hear what you're saying about anti-Semitism, but is it really a problem? And I have to kind of talk people through and explain how it's manifested itself, why there's a problem and what we can do about it. And I think if we can have more of those constructive conversations, we will be in a better place. I do think, frankly, the whole effort to tackle anti-Semitism has been made harder because people think that MPs like me who've been critical of Jeremy Corbyn are simply using it to beat him with a stick, and you know that's really not the case. The way in which I talk about anti-Semitism, the passion with which I talk about anti-Semitism is amplifying really what I hear on the doorstep from my Jewish constituents. And I honestly, I would much rather come on programmes like yours and others and talk about the issues that the vast majority of us really care about in terms of our public services, Labour policies, those sorts of debates. I don't want to come on and have to talk about why my party's got a problem with racism. So the sooner we sort it out, the sooner we can stop talking about it.
A new poll, interestingly, has shown that more people think that Jeremy Corbyn is racist by a long way than Theresa May. Given that the party stands on this sort of very, you know, equalities, anti-racism has been a strong part of the Labour ethos for many decades now. Does that disappoint you? Does that
it does, and because also it's a strong part of Jeremy Corbyn's ethos as well. I mean, he's been on anti-racist rallies and protests and pickets since I was born, and you know, I know that when people attack Jeremy personally, and you know, he's obviously been called an anti-Semite, and I know that hurts him. I've had conversations with him about this issue on many occasions. But he has got to sort of grasp this issue by the nettle and really lead from the front on it. I think we've got an opportunity to move forward positively, but we've all got to try and pull together to do that, and accept people's arguments in good faith.
Well, indeed. Well, we also need to move forward and talk about policies. Let's do that now. Brexit, of course, still dominates. Groundhog Day every day at a party conference, isn't it? It's always Brexit. Big issue for the Tory party, big issue for the Labour Party. Lots of splits. Not just splits now between the leadership of the party and the membership, but members of the leadership. Sir Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, last night contradicted the shadow Chancellor John McDonnell over the party's Brexit stance, particularly over the issue of the second referendum. This morning, speaking to our political editor Ross Kempsell, he has certainly made it possible in everything. When I say everything, everything is on the table, including the possibility of Article 50 being delayed, and so us not leaving the EU on the 29th of March 2019. And certainly many are saying now we are looking at a far greater likelihood of no deal. Do you know what Labour Party policy is on Brexit today?
Yeah, I think we're much clearer, actually, as a result of this conference. I think we're keeping open the option of a people's vote. We want the closest possible relationship to the European Union after Brexit, particularly protecting jobs and livelihoods. And that means the single market, it means the customs union. So I think that's become a lot clearer. I think some of the fuzziness, frankly, is a reflection of the fact that when you're in opposition, you don't have control over events, you have to respond to them. And this is a sort of fast-moving situation. The negotiations are in a terrible mess, and I think, you know, my constituency split roughly down the middle, narrowly leave my constituency, and whether people voted leave or voted remain, what people in my patch say is, God, this is going terribly, isn't it? The negotiations aren't going well, and I think people are very worried about a no deal. So I think we've got to do everything we can to avoid crashing out with no deal. As a Labour Party, we've got to be quite agile and responsive to what's going on. I mean, of course, I would prefer a general election and a Labour government. It's very unlikely, given the polls, the Tories are going to give us that. So that's why I think it's absolutely the right thing, the responsible thing to do, to keep the option of a people's vote on the table.
But who's going to live it? You say people's vote. Again, I keep reiterating this point. I'm not quite sure who was voting back in 2016 if it wasn't people. I'm pretty sure that was the case. It wasn't given to I don't know, ferrets. It was given to people. So it's a second referendum. Why would a second referendum resolve anything more than it would appear the first referendum?
Well, the benefit of a people's vote on the final deal is that, unlike the referendum, where people were kind of, you know, people were given a pretty clear idea of what it meant to remain, because that was the status quo. We understood what what remain meant. With leave, people were offered this big prospectus which basically said we can regain control of our money, our laws and our borders, and thrive economically outside the European Union. And the reason why Theresa May is having such a tough time of it is because I think she's trying to deliver the impossible, because when you line up all those promises next to each other, they can't simultaneously be delivered. And so there are compromises involved. And, you know, what do? Do you stay closer to the EU to protect people's jobs and livelihoods, as we would argue in the Labour Party? But then you get people saying, but what about regaining control of our money, laws and borders? Or you do it the other way. You say, right, we're going to crash out with a hard Brexit, but then people's jobs and livelihoods are at risk. She's trying to deliver the impossible, and I think at this stage, given that whatever form we leave in is going to look remarkably different to what was promised, I think there's a point in principle that people should decide on the final deal, not just 650 MPs. And there's also a pragmatic thing, which is, frankly, given the hung parliament, given the differing views within and between different political parties, I struggle to see how Theresa May could get any deal through.